Beloved brethren, silence, though often seen as a neutral act, carries a profound emotional weight that can deeply affect the people around us. Imagine a moment when someone you care about confides in you, sharing their fears, struggles, or dreams, and your response is silence. While it may stem from a place of uncertainty or hesitation, that lack of response can feel like rejection or indifference to the person who dared to be vulnerable. Silence, though intangible, speaks volumes, and its unintended message can leave lasting scars. In relationships, silence often builds walls where bridges are desperately needed, creating barriers that isolate rather than unite. The burden of silence is not only heavy for the person experiencing it, but also for the person who chooses it. It can be a shield, protecting us from discomfort, conflict, or perceived inadequacy. However, this shield often becomes a prison, locking us in a cycle of avoidance and disconnect. In intimate relationships, whether with a partner, family member, or close friend, silence can erode trust over time. When we withhold our voices, we deny the other person the opportunity to understand us fully, and more importantly, to feel understood themselves. Silence creates a vacuum, and in that void, misunderstandings and assumptions thrive. Silence becomes particularly burdensome in moments of emotional vulnerability. When someone shares their pain or seeks validation, they're offering us a piece of their inner world. Responding with silence can feel like dropping that fragile offering. The weight of feeling unseen or unheard can deepen their pain, leaving them to wrestle alone with their emotions. It's easy to forget that our silence is not neutral. It carries meaning. But to those on the receiving end, it can signal dismissal, disapproval, or an unwillingness to engage. These unspoken messages compound the loneliness that the person may already feel. The barriers silence creates are not always immediate, but can grow over time. In the absence of open communication, misunderstandings fester, resentment builds, and relationships become fraught with tension. The distance created by silence is often subtle at first, a missed opportunity to say, "I'm sorry," or "I hear you." Over time, these missed opportunities accumulate, creating chasms that feel insurmountable. The longer the silence persists, the harder it becomes to break. What begins as hesitation or fear can solidify into a pattern that defines the relationship, leaving both parties feeling disconnected and alienated. Breaking the weight of silence requires courage and self-awareness. It demands that we confront the fears and insecurities that keep us silent. What if we say the wrong thing? What if our words make things worse? These are valid concerns, but they pale in comparison to the damage silence can cause. Speaking up, even imperfectly, signals a willingness to connect and engage. It shows the other person that their emotions matter to us, even if we don't have all the answers. Often, it's not about finding the perfect words, but about showing up and being present. Ultimately, silence is not merely the absence of words, it's the absence of connection. While it may feel safe or comfortable in the moment, it carries a weight that can crush the foundation of our relationships. We must remember that our voices, no matter how uncertain or imperfect, have the power to lift that weight. By choosing to speak, to engage, and to connect, we can turn silence into a bridge, strengthening the bonds that hold us together. In doing so, we not only lighten the burden for others, but also free ourselves from the isolation that silence brings. Silence often stems from fear, a deeply human response to situations where the stakes feel high and the risks of speaking up seem overwhelming. This fear can take many forms, each rooted in our desire to protect ourselves from discomfort, judgment, or pain. For some, the fear of conflict is a powerful deterrent. The idea of confronting someone or expressing a differing opinion can feel like stepping onto a battlefield, with the potential for anger, misunderstanding, or damaged relationships looming large. For others, it's the fear of rejection that keeps them silent. The possibility that their words or feelings might be dismissed or met with disapproval. The fear of conflict is particularly pervasive in relationships where harmony is highly valued. Many of us avoid saying what's on our minds because we don't want to rock the boat or create tension. This fear can be magnified in professional settings, where speaking up might challenge authority or disrupt group dynamics. The problem with this approach is that unspoken concerns don't simply disappear. They fester. Over time, resentment or frustration builds, often manifesting in passive-aggressive behavior or emotional withdrawal. Ironically, the silence meant to preserve peace can lead to greater discord in the long run. Rejection is another potent force behind silence. We are wired for connection, and the thought of being cast out or judged by our peers is deeply unsettling. This fear often shows up in moments of vulnerability, when we want to share our feelings, set boundaries, or express a dissenting opinion. The vulnerability required to speak up feels like exposing ourselves to the possibility of being misunderstood, laughed at, or dismissed. To avoid this risk, we stay silent, convincing ourselves that it's better to protect our self-worth than to face the unknown response of others. Another layer to the fear of silence is the worry of saying the wrong thing. This fear is particularly relevant in emotionally charged or high-stakes conversations. What if our words hurt someone? What if we misstep and make things worse? These concerns are valid, especially in today's world where words can carry significant weight and consequences. However, this fear often paralyzes us, leading us to choose inaction over the risk of imperfection. The irony is that by saying nothing, we may inadvertently cause the very harm we're trying to avoid. Silence, too, can be a form of communication, and its impact can be just as significant as spoken words. Cultural and societal influences often exacerbate these fears. In many cultures, silence is equated with respect, deference, or wisdom. While there are times when silence is appropriate, these norms can also discourage individuals from speaking up when it's most needed. Gender roles and power dynamics further complicate matters. Women, for example, may fear being labeled as too emotional or too assertive, while men might worry about appearing weak or vulnerable. These societal pressures reinforce the idea that silence is safer than risking judgment, perpetuating cycles of fear and avoidance. Ultimately, the fear behind silence is a reflection of our humanity, our longing for connection, safety, and belonging. But while fear is a natural response, it doesn't have to dictate our choices. The key is recognizing the fears that keep us silent and finding ways to navigate them with courage and compassion. Speaking up may feel uncomfortable, but it is often a necessary step toward growth, understanding, and connection. By embracing the possibility of conflict, rejection, or imperfection, we can begin to break free from the grip of fear and discover the transformative power of our voices. Speaking up is one of the most profound ways we can demonstrate empathy and connection. At its core, empathy is about understanding and sharing the feelings of others. When we choose to voice our thoughts, concerns, or support in response to someone's vulnerability, we are actively stepping into their emotional world and showing them that they are seen and valued. While silence may sometimes feel like a neutral or safe option, it often leaves people feeling isolated or unheard. Speaking up, even imperfectly, is a way of bridging that gap, offering validation, and fostering a sense of belonging. One of the most empathetic acts is to acknowledge someone's pain or struggle. Imagine a friend confiding in you about a personal hardship. Responding with words, even something as simple as, "I'm so sorry you're going through this," or "that must be incredibly difficult," can provide a sense of relief and comfort. These words may seem small, but they carry immense power. They signal to the other person that their emotions matter and that they are not alone. In contrast, silence in these moments can feel like indifference. even if that's not the intent. Empathy through speaking up is also about meeting people where they are. It's not about having all the answers or saying the perfect thing, but about being present and engaged. Sometimes the most empathetic response is admitting, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. This kind of honesty reflects a willingness to connect on a human level, free from the pressure of perfection. It shows that the relationship is more important than the discomfort of not knowing how to respond. These small acts of verbal acknowledgement can strengthen bonds and create a foundation of trust. In moments of conflict, speaking up with empathy can be transformative. Instead of responding defensively or retreating into silence, empathetic communication seeks to understand the other person's perspective. Phrases like, I can see why you feel that way, or help me understand what's upsetting you, open the door to meaningful dialogue. These statements don't necessarily mean agreement, but they do convey a willingness to listen and validate the other person's emotions. This approach can diffuse tension, build mutual understanding, and create an environment where both parties feel heard and respected. Empathy in action also means addressing uncomfortable truths when silence could perpetuate harm. Speaking up in these situations requires courage, but it's often the most compassionate choice. For example, if you witness someone being excluded or mistreated, staying silent can reinforce their pain. A simple statement like, I noticed what happened, and it didn't seem right, can make a world of difference to someone feeling marginalized. These acts of verbal solidarity let others know they are not invisible and that their experiences matter. Empathy is not just about feeling, it's about doing, and speaking up is one of the most tangible ways to act. Ultimately, speaking up is a way of saying you matter. It's an acknowledgement of the other person's humanity and a commitment to fostering connection over avoidance. Empathy in action reminds us that our words can be a lifeline for someone in need, a balm for someone in pain, or a bridge in a relationship. While it may feel vulnerable or risky, the rewards far outweigh the discomfort. By choosing to speak, we not only strengthen our relationships, but also contribute to a world where empathy and connection are prioritized over fear and silence. Breaking silence often requires a profound act of courage, one rooted in vulnerability and authenticity. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the willingness to show up as our true selves, even when there are no guarantees of how others will respond. When we choose to speak up, whether to express our feelings, share a difficult truth, or stand up for what we believe in, we take a risk. It's a risk of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected. Yet this very act of breaking silence is also where connection, growth, and transformation begin. Vulnerability has a unique power to dismantle walls and build bridges, allowing us to engage more deeply with others and with ourselves. To break silence, we must first confront the fears that keep us quiet. These fears often stem from deeply ingrained beliefs that revealing our true selves will lead to rejection or criticism. For example, expressing emotions like sadness or fear can feel exposing, especially in cultures that prize stoicism or strength. Similarly, admitting mistakes or confessing insecurities can make us feel inadequate. However, when we embrace vulnerability, we shift the narrative. Instead of viewing it as a liability, we begin to see it as a strength, a way of being honest about our humanity. It is through this honesty that we create opportunities for real connection and mutual understanding. Vulnerability is also the key to authenticity. Authenticity means showing up as who we truly are, not who we think we're supposed to be. Breaking silence in an authentic way requires us to strip away the masks we wear to protect ourselves. For instance, in a heated discussion, authenticity might mean admitting, I'm scared to say this, but it's important to me. These words acknowledge both the fear and the courage involved in speaking up. They invite others into a space of shared humanity, where both vulnerability and connection can flourish. The power of this approach lies in its rawness and sincerity, which often disarms defensiveness and fosters trust. Courage and vulnerability are deeply intertwined. It takes courage to let ourselves be seen, especially when the outcome is uncertain. For example, when addressing a long-standing conflict with a loved one, we might fear their reaction or worry about damaging the relationship further. Yet avoiding the conversation only allows misunderstandings to persist and wounds to deepen. By choosing to speak with vulnerability, we demonstrate courage. The courage to prioritize the relationship over our comfort and to face the discomfort of the unknown. This kind of bravery often inspires others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of honesty and connection. Breaking silence through vulnerability also has the power to heal, not only for ourselves, but for others. When we speak up about our struggles, we give others permission to do the same. For example, sharing a personal story about failure or loss can remind someone else that they are not alone in their pain. Vulnerability creates a sense of solidarity, reducing the isolation that often accompanies silence. Moreover, it can pave the way for collective healing as individuals come together to share their truths and support one another. This healing power of vulnerability is a testament to its transformative potential. Ultimately, the power of vulnerability lies in its ability to foster connection, authenticity, and courage. Breaking silence is never easy, but it is through these acts of vulnerability that we grow as individuals and deepen our relationships. By embracing our fears and choosing to show up anyway, we create a world where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Vulnerability reminds us that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love and connection. We just have to be real. And in that realness, we discover the profound strength and beauty that comes from breaking silence and sharing our truest selves. Silence, though often chosen as a way to avoid conflict or discomfort, can carry unintended consequences that ripple far beyond the moment. One of the most significant outcomes of silence is the emotional toll it takes on others. When we withhold our thoughts, feelings, or support, we may inadvertently leave those around us feeling abandoned, unimportant, or unseen. This is particularly true in moments of vulnerability or crisis, when someone reaches out for understanding or validation and is met with silence instead. While the intent behind silence may not be malicious, its impact can be deeply harmful, creating feelings of isolation and eroding trust. One unintended consequence of silence is the way it can perpetuate misunderstandings and miscommunication. Without clear communication, people are left to interpret silence in their own way, often filling the void with assumptions that may not align with reality. For instance, in a conflict, silence can be interpreted as indifference, disapproval, or even contempt. These interpretations can amplify feelings of hurt and resentment, making resolution even more difficult. What may have started as a small misunderstanding can quickly spiral into a larger issue, simply because silence allowed assumptions to flourish unchecked. The emotional toll of silence is particularly profound in relationships where trust and connection are essential. Silence can create emotional distance, making people feel unsupported or unvalued. In romantic relationships, for example, failing to address issues or express feelings can lead to growing detachment. Partners may feel that their concerns are ignored or that their emotional needs are not prioritized. Similarly, in friendships, silence can be perceived as a lack of care or investment, weakening the bond over time. This erosion of trust and intimacy often happens gradually, making it all the more difficult to recognize and address before significant harm is done. Silence can also perpetuate harm in social and systemic contexts. When we witness injustice or mistreatment, but choose to stay silent, we allow those behaviors to continue unchecked. Silence in these moments is often interpreted as complicity or approval, emboldening harmful actions and leaving those affected feeling unsupported. For example, when a colleague experiences discrimination or exclusion in the workplace and no one speaks up, it not only reinforces the offender's behavior, but also signals to the victim that their experience is not important enough to address. This kind of silence has far-reaching consequences, perpetuating cycles of harm and inequality. Another unintended consequence of silence is the burden it places on those who are already struggling. When someone is dealing with a challenge, whether it's emotional pain, grief, or a difficult decision, silence from others can make their journey even harder. Instead of feeling supported, they may feel as though they have to carry their burden alone. This isolation can intensify feelings of despair or helplessness, as the absence of acknowledgement can make their struggles feel invisible or invalid. While silence might seem like a neutral response, it often adds to the weight of what they're already carrying. Another unintended consequence of silence is the burden it places on those who are already struggling. When someone is dealing with a challenge, whether it's emotional pain, grief, or a difficult decision, silence from others can make their journey even harder. Instead of feeling supported, they may feel as though they have to carry their burden alone. This isolation can intensify feelings of despair or helplessness, as the absence of acknowledgement can make their struggles feel invisible or invalid. While silence might seem like a neutral response, it often adds to the weight of what they're already carrying. Ultimately, silence is rarely neutral. It has the power to hurt, harm, and alienate, even when that is not the intent. Recognizing the unintended consequences of silence is an important step toward fostering healthier relationships and communities. Speaking up, even when it feels uncomfortable, can prevent misunderstandings, validate others' experiences, and interrupt harmful patterns. While silence may seem easier in the moment, the emotional and relational costs are far greater in the long run. By choosing to engage with honesty and empathy, we can mitigate the unintended consequences of silence and create spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Words have the extraordinary power to act as bridges, connecting people across divides of misunderstanding, pain, and distance. When used with intention and care, communication can heal wounds, rebuild trust, and foster a deeper sense of understanding. In moments of conflict or uncertainty, the right words can create a pathway where none seemed possible, offering clarity and connection where silence or avoidance would only deepen the chasm. Speaking up may require courage and vulnerability, but the impact of thoughtful communication can transform relationships, offering a way forward when all seems lost. One of the most healing aspects of communication is its ability to validate emotions. When we take the time to acknowledge someone's feelings, we send a powerful message. I see you and your experience matters. Simple phrases like, I can understand why you feel this way, or that must have been so hard for you, can create an immediate sense of relief and connection. Validation doesn't require agreement or resolution. It's about making space for someone's emotions to be seen and honored. These words act as a bridge, allowing both parties to stand on common ground, even in the midst of disagreement or tension. Communication also fosters understanding by clarifying intentions and reducing assumptions. In the absence of words, people often fill the silence with their own interpretations, which can lead to misunderstandings and unnecessary hurt. For example, if a friend cancels plans without explanation, their silence might be interpreted as indifference or avoidance. A simple message explaining the situation, I'm feeling overwhelmed today and need to rest, but I value our time together, can completely shift the narrative. Words can dismantle the walls built by silence, offering transparency and fostering trust. Another powerful function of communication is its ability to repair and rebuild after harm has been done. Apologies, for instance, are a form of bridge building that acknowledges pain and takes responsibility. Saying, "I'm sorry for how my actions affected you and I want to make it right," can initiate a process of healing and reconciliation. These words don't erase the harm, but they open the door to rebuilding trust. Similarly, expressions of gratitude, appreciation, or love can reinforce the positive foundations of a relationship, reminding people of the value they hold in each other's lives. Communication also creates opportunities for growth and learning. By sharing our perspectives and listening to others, we expand our understanding of the world and each other. Thoughtful dialogue allows us to explore differences without fear, fostering empathy and mutual respect. For instance, in conversations about difficult topics, such as cultural differences or personal values, words can bridge gaps in knowledge and perspective. Statements like, "I'd like to understand your point of view better," or "Can you share more about how you see this?" invite openness and connection, turning potential barriers into opportunities for deeper understanding. Ultimately, words are bridges because they remind us of our shared humanity. They connect us through the expression of our thoughts, emotions, and intentions. While silence can create distance, words can close that gap, bringing people together in meaningful ways. They are tools of healing, understanding, and transformation, offering us the chance to move closer to one another, even in the face of difficulty. When we choose to speak with honesty, empathy, and care, we not only strengthen our relationships, but also contribute to a world where connection and understanding are prioritized. In this way, words become the bridges that carry us toward each other, one conversation at a time. Navigating difficult discussions requires courage, compassion, and a commitment to honesty. These conversations often feel daunting because they involve vulnerability, the risk of conflict, or the possibility of emotional pain. However, avoiding them only postpones the inevitable and can allow misunderstandings or hurt feelings to deepen. Practicing brave conversations is about approaching these moments with intentionality and care, recognizing that even when the topics are hard, the act of engaging in dialogue can be transformative. By creating an environment of trust and respect, we open the door to connection and resolution. One of the first steps in navigating a brave conversation is preparation. While spontaneity has its place, difficult discussions often benefit from thoughtful planning. Reflecting on your feelings, intentions, and desired outcomes beforehand can help you approach the conversation with clarity. For example, if you're addressing a conflict, consider what you hope to achieve, whether it's mutual understanding, an apology, or a resolution. Equally important is acknowledging your emotions and being honest with yourself about any fears or insecurities you might have. By entering the conversation with self-awareness, you set the stage for honest and productive dialogue. Another essential aspect of brave conversations is the use of compassionate communication. This means expressing yourself in a way that honors both your feelings and the other person's humanity. I statements are particularly effective in this regard, as they allow you to share your perspective without assigning blame. For instance, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," you might say, "I feel unheard when I try to share my thoughts." This subtle shift reduces defensiveness and invites collaboration rather than confrontation. Active listening is equally crucial. Giving the other person space to speak without interruption or judgment fosters mutual respect and understanding. Finally, practicing brave conversations means embracing discomfort and uncertainty. These discussions are rarely easy, and it's natural to feel nervous or unsure. However, growth often comes from leaning into discomfort rather than avoiding it. Remind yourself that the goal is not to win the conversation, but to build a bridge toward understanding and connection. Even if the discussion doesn't lead to immediate resolution, the act of engaging with honesty and compassion can strengthen your relationship over time. Brave conversations are not about perfection. They are about showing up with courage and care, trusting that the effort to communicate will pave the way for healing and growth. Prioritizing relationships over the discomfort of speaking up is a conscious choice that requires courage and intentionality. In the moment, it can feel easier to avoid difficult conversations or suppress our feelings rather than risk conflict or awkwardness. However, this avoidance often comes at a cost. It creates emotional distance, fosters misunderstandings, and weakens the foundation of trust that relationships are built on. Choosing connection over comfort means valuing the health and longevity of a relationship more than the temporary relief of avoiding discomfort. It's about investing in meaningful communication, even when it feels challenging. When we prioritize connection, we acknowledge that relationships thrive on honesty and openness. Avoiding a difficult conversation might feel like self-preservation in the short term, but over time, it can lead to resentment, frustration, or a sense of disconnection. For example, withholding your feelings about a recurring issue with a friend or partner might spare you an uncomfortable moment, but it also prevents the relationship from growing and evolving. Addressing these issues with care and vulnerability allows both parties to understand each other better, paving the way for deeper intimacy and mutual respect. Connection, after all, is nurtured through the courage to be seen and heard. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.